The Recovered Life Show, the show that helps people in recovery live their best recovered lives. And here is your host, Damon Frank.
And welcome back to the Recovered Life Show. It is Monday, June 20th, 2022. I'm here with my co-host, the always lovely and wearing green today, might I add.
There you
Kristina
go.
Dennis. How you doing, Kristina?
I'm doing great, Damon Frank. Happy Monday. How are you?
Happy Monday to you. I thought for a second, I love the green is very in right now. So for people listening on the podcast, I want to let you know I have the most stylish co-host around. You're wearing the it color, Kristina.
It is the it color right now. And you know, it's really funny. Fun fact. Any picture of a model wearing green is the least selling magazine. Did you know that? That
No, I
green
did
covers
not.
sell the least. Isn't that funny? So I'm surprised it's popular right now, but I'll go with it. It's my
You know
St.
what? Go
Patty's
with
Day.
It's working well for you. And we don't care
Aw.
what color you're wearing because you always have really great advice and bring so much to the podcast here. Guys, we're going to have a really great episode. It's Monday, June 20th, 2022. It's the crack of dawn. The birds are tweeting. We're careening right towards July, Kristina.
There you go.
I can't even believe it. I feel like I'm a time traveler. I blink and we're in another month. It's going to be Christmas again soon. God, don't even say it.
Yeah, it was like bite your tongue. No way, not there yet. We're going to enjoy a summer.
Absolutely. No way. We're going to
are.
enjoy the summer and we're going to have a great recovered life together this summer. All of us, we're going to have a lot of stuff going on. So it's going to be fun.
Before we get started, though, on one of my favorite topics, I want to let everybody know, thank you for sharing, liking, following, sending us comments on the podcast. We so enjoy having your feedback. Come join the Recovered Life family over at recoveredlife.us. You can join our community. It's free. It takes less than a minute. And you can ask us questions directly and leave your comments. Come be part of our family. It's called recoveredlife.us. That's where you can find us, recoveredlife.us.
Thank you so much, Kristina, for mentioning that. Like I said before, that little break there, we do have an amazing show. We're going to be talking about a topic that I know you want to talk about, Kristina, that everybody asks in recovery. And look, whether you got a day or a decade, you're asking, are you doing God's will or are you doing your own will, right? And that is the topic of today's Recovered Life Show.
It is the $1 million question, or at least the $1,000 question. And I know that I struggled with this over and over again in early sobriety. And I recognize that Recovered Life has members that are not part of a 12-step community. However, in the 12 steps, step 3 talks about turning our life and will over to God. And so many people get stumped by this. How about you, Damon? Did you know God's will?
I would say well, you know what you're talking about God's will. I gotta be honest, I'm still a little confused about God's will sometimes. I do know though, here's what I've come up with. Okay. I believe that it's God's will in the absence of my own will, right? So if I can let go of my own thoughts, beliefs, and desires long enough to sit in the silent gap, right? Something emerges. Now, is that God's will? I would like to think it is.
Right. And I think God will do what they need to do with it, or the universe, or whoever you consider your higher power. I know that I've worked with people in the past who would be paralyzed by this question, and not wanting to move forward. And I've heard several different ways that it's explained. They are my favorite. One is you do something. You move forward on some kind of issue, you make a decision. And if that's the wrong one, you're not in God's will, and you turn around and you try something else. And I think that's so true, that I have in the past with this desire that I was going to do recovery in the most perfect way and not make any mistakes. I mean, we just recently did a show on surrendering. And one of the things I had to surrender to was that I don't always know what I'm supposed to do next.
Yeah. Well, I think, one of the things that's confusing about God's will is I think that people have a conception of God when they come into recovery, right? When they get sober, I know that a lot of people there, it usually breaks down into a couple camps: people that don't believe in God at all, and
Mm-hmm.
people who definitely believe in God and feel that they know everything about God and they're religious and all this stuff. And then there's kind of everybody in between, right? Now, for me, I felt like I knew God, but then when I got sober, a question was posed to me and it said, why would God have a nice kid like you end up in alcohol, end up in a 12-step program, end up drunk, right?
Right.
How would that happen, if you had this relationship with God? I realized that, one, that was meant to shock me a bit. That wasn't
Yes.
really the question they wanted me to answer. But what this did get me to thinking is that maybe my perception of God and my perception with the higher power wasn't accurate. I realized that I didn't have a relationship. I had an understanding, but I didn't have a relationship. And I think to stay sober long term, when you find God's will for your life, it's more of a harmony about a relationship. It's not
Yes.
God saying, you will now do this. And I realized that I came in that my God wasn't that nice when I first
No.
got sober. Like,
Yes.
my perception of God wasn't somebody who really took care of you. My perception of God was somebody who punished you.
Yes. Oh, I'm so glad that you said that because I do believe that is true. I came from a very religious background, and the God that I knew of my understanding at the time that I came in was a punishing God, was one that was kind of keeping tasks and tallying. Oh, she did 3 good things, but she did these 4 bad things, and I'm going to punish her. And one of the hardest concepts that I had to come up with are kind of realign was this idea that if I was doing good things, then bad things weren't supposed to happen to me. And I would feel like I was betrayed by God. And so first I had to work on that relationship with God. And then I had to come with the understanding that I am not God. And I know that sounds like duh, but I really thought that it was my job to run the universe. It was my job to keep everybody safe. It was my job to go in and run your life so that I felt good, and so did you feel good. And what I had to understand is that God isn't a punishing God, and at least in my world, God isn't a punishing God, and I'm not God. And then the third thing that I had to learn was that I had a set of values. And I always tell this to people. We're worried about God's will means we're worried about the ending, right? If you have results in mind when you're taking action, if you have a specific result in mind, then you're probably not in God's will 100%. But if you can make decisions on your value system, then it makes it pretty easy to take the next 2 steps. And that's what we're supposed to be focused on anyway.
I love that. I love that.
Right? I have a value system. And so then it's very easy for me to look at, and I think this is something that we call the principles, of the 12 steps, or we have a code of behavior. And as long as we're acting in accordance to that code of behavior, then we can leave God's will up to God.
Yeah. And here's the thing. I love that you say values, because one of the things that I see as a major confusion with people in recovery with God's will is they think it has to do with more people, places, and thing decisions. So a good example of this is you'll hear a lot of times that people will, they'll sober up and they'll start to get a life back. And they're like, well, I could become an accountant, or I could become a park ranger. Is it God's will for me to become a park ranger or an accountant? And they'll ping pong that back and forth forever. That's really not, I don't think, what it's about. I think it's about how would you be, how are you going to be a park ranger? How are you going to do the being of being an accountant? It's who you are and how you do it, right?
Yes.
Not what you do or who you're with or the car you drive. This is really the God's will thing, right? Like, so we found, Kristina, that we're both in service businesses, right?
Yes.
Like, so we're being of service. If we do it, if I do it through one of my businesses that I have, or if I do it as being a sober coach, I'm still being of service. That's God's will, I believe, in my life, is that I'm supposed to be of service to other people. I'm supposed to inspire them, motivate them, and get them to where they want to be, right? And need to be. That's more of the God's will, not whether I do it over here or over there. That's just, I think, has a lot to do with footwork in your surroundings.
and the next step, right? If you can look at every decision that you have to make through those lenses and stay open, then you're probably going to end up on the right path. I'll give you an example of God's will, or when something gets done and it's easy and you go, okay, that was God's will. Within my first year of sobriety, I got sober in Denver, 1997, and they tell us, back then it was 12 steps, that you don't make any big moves your first year, right? That's what they say. Don't make any big moves your first year. Don't make any big changes. Well, at about 9.5 months of sobriety, I contacted an old employer, and he kind of haphazardly, I can't say that word right now, he kind of put it out there, hey, I'd love for you to come to California. And I had this rule, this legalistic point of view that I'm not supposed to make any moves. But thank goodness I had a counselor and a coach and people to say, well, just explore it. You didn't make this happen. You just called and said hello. He came up with the idea. Well, before I knew it, I was out in California interviewing for a job, got the job. They relocated me, and I was here. Now, if I had stayed legalistic and in my viewpoint that you're not supposed to move within a year, I wouldn't be in this state. And I think sometimes those are really good indications that if it happened to you and it wasn't of your own volition and it wasn't you making actions toward it, that's probably God's will, right? So I always tell people that we get very worried about these big decisions. We get very worried about, like you said, what job should I have? Who should I marry? And I tell everybody, you wait until you feel it inside. And you will see doors open, that help you go into the same direction, the right direction. Because maybe sometimes those doors that are closed is not because you're going in the wrong direction. Maybe it's because you need to learn something at the level that you're at before they open. You never know.
Well, yeah, you do never know. And, and I think a lot of people are talking about this now post-COVID, Kristina. We hear a lot about recovered life discussions, people moving from cities and homes that they've lived in forever because of economics, because of the job market has changed, right?
Yes.
And or their marriage status has changed, or there has been a death, there's been something, and there is this there usually is this proclamation at the end of that a lot of the times where it's like, I must have been doing something wrong.
Yes.
And it's so not really the right path. I know for coaching, it's that, it's more of an accumulation of your life and the things that you've experienced and the things that you've learned and the things that you've done. I was sharing, I think in a past episode in May that, I had put 6 months to 8 months of my life back in my 30s and early 40s working to learn a specific skill in marketing that did not work out for me. I made zero money on it. Right now, I had full-time employment. I was doing things, but I really wanted to learn this skill. And I really believed that it was God's will that I was going to sort of learn this skill. And I did everything I was supposed to do. And I was never able to capitalize on it. Well, we were talking a month ago and you're like, where did you get the skill? And I said, oh, I taught it. I learned it like years ago, right? And never applied it. Now I'm applying it every day, right? These particular skills every day. But in my mind, it was a failure. It's like, well, I experienced this. I got nothing out of it. Zero ROI, return on investment, I thought.
Right.
It's over. I lost. I failed. It obviously wasn't God's will. I was just chasing a rabbit down a hole. I'm never going to, right? But that wasn't going on. There was a bigger picture. I needed those skills. I didn't need the win. I had plenty of wins during that period of time. I didn't need the win. I needed the skills because I needed to apply those skills for a much bigger play down the road.
Oh, that's so good. That's really, really good. I'd love to discuss it further. I think that we can apply that same principle to relationships. And this is something that I deal with a lot of clients where they feel like they're in a relationship and it wasn't God's will because it wasn't successful. Yeah. Nope.
You know what? I want to dive into that because I know people that are listening right now on the podcast or on the live here. They're saying they're going through this right now. It might not be a significant other. It might be a friend. It might be a family member. And they feel that they are 100% failure. They feel that confused. It's like, well, I thought it was God's will that I was in this relationship or had this relationship. And now all of a sudden they're stunned and they're thinking all that time is lost. All those experiences are lost. You say that that's not true. So after the quick break here, Kristina, you're going to jump in and you're going to give us some wisdom about relationships and God's will. Hold tight. We'll be right back. If you are newly sober, trying to get sober, or you've been sober for decades and are looking to take your sobriety to the next level, the Recovery Breakthrough 6-week transformation concierge coaching program might be right for you. Have Damon Frank and Kristina Dennis build a custom roadmap to get you on the path to getting what you really need. Receive hands-on concierge coaching and stay focused and productive with our daily check-ins. If you're ready to experience your recovery breakthrough and start the journey towards the transformation you deserve, book a free get-to-know-you call today and find out what is possible in your recovery. To find out more about Recovery Breakthrough and to book your free call, go to recoveredlife.us. That's recoveredlife.us.
You're listening to the Recovered Life Show.
Okay, Kristina, we're all hanging tight here because we want to hear your thoughts about relationships and God's will. Look, so many people, they're sitting there, they're thinking, I blew it. I got nothing out of this. The relationship was unsuccessful. It must not have been God's will.
Well, I think it's important to define success, right, in a relationship. Of course, we don't marry because, we're thinking we're going to get a divorce. But I can tell you that all 3 of my marriages have been successful to a point, and they've all brought me to this place. And it is important to remember that because I know a lot of people will come out of a relationship and think that was a complete waste of time. But there is no way that if you showed up within your value system and you learned and you risked being loved, that is a failure. And I think it's really important to realize that. It goes with the idea that if something isn't how we decide it's successful, if something isn't defined the way we think it is, it must not have been God's will. And I've heard people say that over and over again, and it's just not helpful. Of course, we can learn something from every relationship.
Well, it's a zero-sum game thinking. And, I will say that I have suffered from this a lot, friendships are one of those too, Kristina, friendships, you've talked about having friendships that are seasonal. I've talked about having friendships that are seasonal. And I thought, looking back, it's like, well, I'm not friends with this person anymore. Maybe that wasn't a great friendship. Maybe we didn't experience all these things as friends that I thought we did. No, that we did, but there was a season for that. That season ended. There might be another season. I don't know, but it wasn't a loss. It was really great. Right. So I love that you're talking about this black and white thinking. I think, how do we get out of that with God's will? That would be my question for you, because I know a lot of people are listening to this and they're saying, man, I'm stuck in this. Like, I either think it's this or that. And I have a hard time seeing that anything could be a shade of gray when it comes to God's will.
Well, you have to always remember that you have your perspective, and your perspective is limited. There is a meditation in the language of letting go, which is one of my favorite daily meditations for codependence. And it talks about how you can be looking at a picture, but you're only seeing 2 inches of that picture. And so you have no idea what that picture means. But as you continue to step back, and you stay in your value system, and you stay being of service and showing up honestly with integrity every single day, you will eventually see the whole picture. It's one of the things about getting older that I wish we could bottle for younger people, but it's that perspective. And so holding your perspective, wearing it like a loose sweater, understanding that you are just looking at it from your point of view will help you. will help you understand. Plus, there is no cosmic checks and balances. And, that means that we are all living, if we wake up every day and we stay sober and we do what we can to live by the principles, to live within our value system, we will know the very next indicated step. And that is all that we have available to us.
Absolutely. You know what? For me in my life now, I've realized that, I just need to play full out
Mm-hmm.
and let go. So much of God's will is just about letting go and receiving it.
Yes.
It's not really about doing anything. It's just letting go of what you think you need to do.
Yes, absolutely. And letting go, which goes into surrendering and all of these really squishy principles that we talk about, letting go of what you think the outcome is supposed to be. That's why I say defining what is successful needs to change. For many of us, successful marriage does not mean that you're together for 45 years. Now, no one gets married hoping that they will get a divorce, but we can learn from every single one of those experiences that prepares us for the next right thing.
Yeah. And I think especially in this post-COVID world, look, the economy